thinking about that all day. I was like, oh, maybe I should get a ring light, maybe I should. And I just thought,
okay, I'm gonna count 3, 2, 1, and then I'll take the snapshot. Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Don't you know that you're a fact? 'Cause I'm a fact, and we're a fact, and that's a fact.
Hello, Fairmats lovers. Welcome to another episode of That's a Fact. I'm your host, Kirsty Adams, and I am blessed to be sitting beside Marcia Joshua and Shiba Matsatsa, who are such experts in the business and legalities of music and arts entertainment world. Welcome to Marcia Joshua and Shiba Matsatsa. Please give them a wave and a hello.
shame.
Thank you so much for joining the show. I am such fans of your work, and I'm sure everyone else is that knows of you. And whoever does not know you should definitely get to know you because it is worthwhile, and it is such an honor to have you on the show and to have your expertise on the show. As your question master on the show, and as That's a Fact usually runs, I'm going to be asking questions around your expertise and how it pertains to the world of arts, especially considering women in the arts, because that is our business. So without further ado, my very first question is just simply, how are you doing?
I am good. I'm blessed. I am grateful to see the new year. As you know, the times we find ourselves in, it's uncertain. So I feel good. I am good.
It's a difficult one to try to answer generally, because I think, we're all very much used to a roller coaster of emotions every day, every hour, Today, I'm feeling quite refreshed. I've been very busy lately, which I'm grateful for. I think it's a privilege to have something to do during a time where, everything is so uncertain. So I think it's mostly gratitude that I'm feeling these days. So thank you for having me here as well. Grateful for that too.
Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm just glad that everyone is safe and healthy as much as they can, and just functioning, just doing with the most or what they can with the time of isolation. To give us a full rundown of what you do, where you come from, why you do it. Give us a full rundown about yourself.
It's funny, this question, it goes along with the sort of pronunciation. Shiba, Melissa, Mazaza, I always have these three names together because they speak directly to the kind of person that I am, what I do, and my identity. And, my parents are from Malawi. I was born in the UK, but I live in Cape Town. And there's this sort of jumbling of cultures and belief systems. And I think that's very sort of evident in my name. But also there's a jumbling of experiences, cultures, and influences in the things that I do. So I started out as an art student. I think this was 2012? When I left UCT, Michaela's School of Fine Arts. And I thought for the longest time, because I was always good at art at school and everyone was telling me that that's what I should pursue, that that's what I should be doing. And it took me actually going to UCT and trying to get a degree in fine arts to realize that I didn't want to be an artist, but I wanted to be around artists. I wanted to enable artists, and I wanted to be able to describe the things that artists were trying to do and to feel and to contribute to the world. And so shortly after that, I became a voiceover artist. I think at the time, people weren't familiar with voiceover artists. I mean, you hear voices on TV and radio adverts and you think, oh, how do they do that? I was actually a waitress at the time and I was still trying to figure my life out. Wow, this question, we're going to be here forever if I go really in depth with it. So I'm going to try and skip through some of these things. But, I was a waitress and I had a customer who overheard me taking down some orders and said, we're looking for a voice for Elle magazine. We've got a year-long, campaign that we want to do. Would you come in and do a read? And I thought, it's better than serving people coffee every day, I guess. I mean, I enjoyed my job, but this I didn't know anything about, and Elle magazine was a thing back then, So I said yes, and I've been doing that ever since. It's been a bit over a decade, and I've voiced hundreds of campaigns. It's been really fun. Turns out I'm quite good at it. But after that, I realized that music has been, a golden thread throughout my entire life. My parents had a huge record collection. I was always singing along to the radio, trying to learn lyrics, things like that. And so after my exposure to this kind of job as a voiceover artist, I became more curious about singers and songwriters and whether or not it was the same thing. So the skills that I was learning, I was wondering if people who were making music were also sort of privy to those kinds of skills. And so I was doing a bit of research, and I would sort of make notes about the music that I was listening to. And I sent that into a magazine called One Small Seed. One day I had a blog when the internet came along, and they said, please, could you come and do some music reviews for us? And since then, I've been, working for various platforms as a journalist, OK Africa, True Africa, Afropunk, Mixmag, Resident Advisor, Red Bull Music, the list goes on. And as I was growing as someone who's experiencing music, front to back, more and more artists would approach me and ask for help, tips. How do we do this? What do we do if we want to get a bit more publicity, if we want an event? And oftentimes I didn't know the answer. So I'd say, okay, I'm not really sure, but I know how to find out. So I became a door lady, a stage manager. The magazine started having events and we'd run those. And so every sort of opportunity I got to learn something about the music industry, I would take that. And that's brought me to today, where I've been managing artists directly or indirectly through other companies for about 2.5 years now. And it's just a jumble of all of these things that form the sort of structure that is me right now. So
it's not going to be as long, I think. My life's not exciting at all. So I'm Cape Town born and raised, grew up on the Cape Flats, matriculated in 1993, and then I went straight to study law at the University of the Western Cape. I had another first choice, but then I was led to go join my twin sister at UWC. She studied psychology and I studied law. And I went straight into the corporate world after that. I did articles for 2 years, wrote my board exams, and then I started working. I was admitted as an attorney in 2000. Worked in corporate probably for 15 years. I took a bit of a sabbatical when my children were younger. I went back into the workforce, and then I changed my area of specialization in 2018 to focus on entertainment law. I am a wife, a mom of 2 teenagers. I run a household. In the middle of all of this, I have to balance my work, myself, my teenagers, and everything. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's epic. And I'm not a mother myself, but I look up to mothers so much, because to do that on top of your profession is just very inspiring. What type of artists do you manage, do you work with?
I'm a legal consultant. I act as legal counsel. So I mostly work with producers, individual artists, directors, and different creatives in the industry.
I just wanted to also say that I wish I had met you before, Marcia, because I definitely need you. At the moment, I'm working with mostly, I don't want to say mostly, I'm working with African artists, Black artists. I started my own company last year in January. It's been about a year now. But before that, I was working with lots of different kinds of artists, different genres. But I realized that a lot of the work that I'm trying to do is necessary for artists who don't necessarily have access to things like, educational tools, studios, usually growing up in townships. And these are the kinds of artists who are trailblazers, really. I mean, in things like amapiano, thorn, jazz. There's not a lot of assistance for artists in general, whether that is financial, psychological, emotional. And so that's where I've put my focus. So at the moment, my very first artist who's doing particularly well, his name is Amos right now. He is a gem. You don't get very, very many artists like him. He came up as a neo-soul sort of singer, but he was swept up by the amapiano scene. He's done very well in the last year. I'm very proud of him. He has managed to get a song that he wrote in the top 20 songs streamed in South Africa for 2020. He's got a Netflix deal. All of these things have just been because he's he's so focused and so hungry. And I've come on, board to try and help him steer the ship and to make sure that he's protected and that he can grow in the best way that he possibly can.
I'm sure that this kind of career is very eventful. And my next question leads me to ask, what was your most favorite project to work on in your career?
Actually, my favorite project this happened last year, just before COVID became a thing that we were concerned about here in South Africa. I have a couple of friends up in Norway, and I had met them through a late friend of mine down here. He passed away from COVID last year. But the four of us had put together an event that we wanted to have to create an exchange from South Africa to Norway. And so we got in touch with a bunch of artists that we were aware of down here. It was called Mela Goes Offline. And this was happening during a festival in Norway called Bila. And that happens every year, where you have professionals from all over the world come through for a conference and a bunch of showcases that happen over a week. So an offline event is sort of like a satellite event for this conference. So what they do is they invite delegates from around the world. And so we were the South African delegation, and we had our event at a place called Mela Husa, which is Mela House in Oslo Central. So we took KO, rapper, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with, probably should be. He's very influential in our South African sort of history in terms of music, style, all sorts of things, and his own label as well, Skanda Republic. And then we also took De Krook, who is one of the first guys to have played on the piano on commercial radio. Very, very talented, very driven. He's also a businessman. And so the point of this festival and conference is to have people share their expertise in sort of conferences, workshops, but also to be able to network and grow their sort of business ideas and find new acts. So it's all about emerging acts. It's not just about people who have already made themselves in their sort of specific scenes and are now looking to sort of connect with more established artists. This is for people who are starting out and need to reach, the movers and shakers in the industry quite quickly. So De Krook, KO, and a bunch of other people from Ghana, King George, Katu DCs, who's a DJ from Uganda. We had Suhail, who was from India, producer. So it was just like the place, the name Mela means sort of a melange, a mix. We had a bunch of different people come through, and we had some showcases, some panel discussions. We met up with some Norwegian artists, and there were some collaborations. We went to studio. It was a lot of fun. But this is the first time that I went to Norway on my own. I had gone before for another different conference where I had been asked to speak. And this was just a couple of months before the trip. So the second time I'd gone, I knew the lay of the land. I'd become very sort of versed in how to get around. So the second time around was much better, but it was very exciting because this is completely fresh ground for us. We got to sort of set the tone for what we wanted to do. We built everything from scratch. It was snowing as well. So it was a very different atmosphere to what we were used to in South Africa. And we all were, as experienced as we were in our different sort of scenes, we were all sort of starting from scratch and thinking, well, nobody knows us here, so we really need to be on our A game and express and represent South Africa in the best way that we knew how. And I thought that was extremely fun. I learned a lot. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. It was wonderful.
Sounds incredible. Wow. And I'm sure you represented with pride and with excellence there. I hope that was the experience at least. And yeah, was it strange to be in the conference there, or was it more of an excitement?
I don't know how to explain it. As someone who I suppose tries to be very specific with the words that I choose, I still haven't figured out what the word is that I would use to describe this experience. As soon as I stepped off the plane, I felt at home. There isn't, I think that in South Africa, we tend to follow in the footsteps of sort of American artists and practices where, we look towards the West and we think, well, maybe, our hip hop or rap artists need to be able to emulate their styles to be able to top charts, etc., etc. But we, this festival, this conference, these events that we put together, Like I said, we're focusing on emerging acts and breaking into new territories. So there was an even playing field. And so it's you're not fighting against the expectations of other people around you because no one knows each other. You haven't really seen a track record. So you put your best foot forward and people take you at face value and everyone is open. People want to hear what you have to say. They're keen to listen to the music. It's not as if because someone is not performing in English or in Norwegian or whatever other languages that they would be saying, okay, well, we're not really interested in that right now. Everyone is open to hearing what everybody has to offer. And so that really is quite freeing. It's I think when people see a track to success that they think is tried and trusted because so many people around you in the industry are doing the exact same thing, you forget that when you're in a completely new place, that you don't necessarily have to fight any sort of preconceived notions. You're there as you are, and people are very accepting of what you have to offer, and it's a very sort of giving space. So not strange at all.
That is absolutely true, and I really would vouch for anyone to follow that advice of going in your own lane, and whatever you pick up along the way on the outskirts is something for influence, but not for the main stage. If you understand what I'm saying.
So, like I mentioned earlier, I changed specializations in 2018. In 2019, I was fortunate enough to work on an international production, which forced me in a way to hit the ground running because it was still fairly new to me, which was good in the sense that I could learn on the ground. I was right there with everyone. I could ask the questions I needed to. It's very exciting to see where South Africa is going and where Cape Town is going specifically. I think it's a great space to watch. I think there's a lot of interest because I feel like you can be in Cape Town, but you can choose this to be anywhere else in the world. Cape Town is so beautiful, and I'm only going to speak from a Cape Town perspective because this is where I am and this is where I work. So I think it's exciting to see where things are going to go. So being part of that production was great. I could be on set, I could see how everything's done, whereas if you compare it to just a normal corporate job in the legal field, you're sitting behind a desk, you don't really see people, you just read contacts every day, or you just advising on a call or via email, whereas this for me was awesome because I could see how things work, how things are put together, what it takes for things to be put together, how long it takes. It's blood, sweat and tears just to get something on screen. So for me, that opened my eyes a lot, and it really, I think it set things up nicely for me because now with the next project, it gets better. You know what to expect. You know how things are put together, so you can approach it in that way. I'm very excited to see more things coming out of South Africa, coming out of Cape Town. And I think it's a great space to be in.
It's so fine to have Cape Town bias because we are pretty and our place is pretty. You also mentioned the fact that you worked on the Blood and Water Netflix show. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Can a little bit. What? So like I said, it was my first show working on an international show. It was good in the sense from an academic point of view to learn other territories, laws, look at contacts from other territories. I'm not at liberty to speak too much about it, but just understanding the way different lawyers from different countries do things differently. So it was nice to be to sit with that and look at that and see it from a different perspective. I think in general, we have to, when you work on an international show, you have to look at the country that you're operating in, but you also have to look at the country where that you're contacting with. So that's important to keep in mind all the time.
As this kind of career and this kind of business runs, you get all sorts of kinds of incidents. And on that note, I'd like to ask if there were any difficult incidents if there were any difficult incidents with an artist that you've experienced. Tell us only if you would like to.
I'm gonna speak generally. I find just as a lawyer in the industry, I find when people are entering contracts, people tend to want to overprotect themselves, which is good, but it's also not good. In the sense that the very basis of entering into a contract is good faith. So there must be some sort of trust. And if you can't trust who you're contracting with, if you feel that you need to completely protect yourself, scratch out every clause in the agreement, then I think you need to take a step back and say, okay, do I really want to work with this person? There must be good faith between the parties. And I know people are not really trusting in this day and age. I think it's the online influence sites, or people are just afraid to relinquish their rights. I think it's very important to understand what you are doing, what type of contract you're entering into, what your rights are. So I won't say a particular artist was difficult or a person was difficult, but I feel in the contracting phase, I feel people want to overprotect themselves. And it does cause delays. There's a lack of understanding, perhaps. And I think it's good to have somebody to speak to that can explain it to them before they enter into an agreement.
It's a tricky situation because of you're handling someone's life here, basically. I mean, if there isn't, if it's not being in the medical field, it's being a lawyer. Yeah, and that trust factor is just very important. And I can imagine how difficult it is to foster that and convince. But at the same time, if you're born to do it, you're meant to do it.
There's always going to be a difficulty somewhere. I think that if you have a career that doesn't have any kind of difficulty, something's missing. Something's still coming then, because there are a lot of. Let me be frank. There's a shortage of really decent, and I'll speak from an artist management point of view. The reason why I'm doing this for this artist particularly is because there's a shortage of really good managers who understand the business, who know what's going on. I mean, some of the best right now. I was working with Black Major in 2018, and Sevi Spanuti manages Black Major. She owns the company, and she's one of the best. I learned everything I know from her, and she is busy, so busy. And some of the things that I experienced while working with her, I think that what people don't understand about management is what it means to be managed and what a manager actually is supposed to do and not do for you, and what the expectation is. I think that a lot of artists will say, okay, I think I need a manager. Maybe they're going to make certain things happen for me. Everything is going to be fine once I get a manager. It's a little bit backwards. I think that the difficulty comes when people assume that they need things that they're probably not ready for. So if you don't have an actual career to manage, your manager can't really help you. There needs to be some kind of movement. An artist needs to be proactive before they can see their career go in any kind of direction. So, another thing, like Marcia was just saying, I completely agree. There's a lot of trust that goes into it, handing over your career to another person to say, please help me, to steer the ship. You always have to have your paperwork in place when you enter into a management agreement, because essentially, it's someone's life, and you need to understand exactly what you're agreeing to, for how long, who's doing what is the remuneration, where is the money coming from, who's going to be signing things, the works. So, I think in short, you need to really sort of, as an artist and as a manager, understand that, have something to manage. There needs to be something happening in order to make it go further. But also around that partnership, there needs to be a solid agreement about what is happening and what happens if things don't go according to what the expectations are. You need to understand what the expectations are and trust that the person that you are interacting with can actually carry out the duties that need to be carried out and not what you expect or think a manager or an artist is supposed to do. There needs to be an understanding, and there needs to be trust, and then there needs to be paperwork. So I think those are some common problems, difficulties that I've experienced where, even when I was not experienced, I didn't understand fully before what I needed to know and what I needed to do in order to be able to perform my duties. But the number one thing is that everybody needs to be productive. Learn as much as you can as you go and never stop learning. If someone approaches you and says, I know everything about the music business, don't worry, I'm the best, red flag. Because things change so quickly in this industry. I mean, in the last few years, you've seen how social media has changed the way that we communicate. Even with, legal, I'm sure there are a few things that have changed, in the last few years, yes, that people just don't know about. And if you don't actively go and pursue that knowledge, you're not going to be able to execute.
Inspire the manager. That's the slogan here. You mentioned something about technology, and which leads us to the next question about social media and technology. Do you think it makes things easier for artists or harder for artists? And I think when we say something like this, we're especially talking about the current times.
Things easier. Well, it depends on what things. I think if we're considering the current time right now and we're talking about technology and social media, this is something that's always been important. And I think that people now trying to sort of shift and say, okay, content is king, or whatever the saying is these days. It's always been true. Whether we're in a lockdown or a pandemic, or whether things are normal, you always need to keep an eye on that. But I think that social media and technology are tools. These are things that help you get things done more efficiently, more effectively. So yes, if you want to reach a lot of people in a short amount of time, and you want to reach specific people, great, definitely easier. If you want to maintain your sanity and you want to maintain your sense of, I suppose, creativity and lower your stress levels, don't think social media is going to help you with that. You will probably be interacting with some people who understand the effects of social media image building, content creation. But if you don't master your own understanding of the way that the world and the way that it moves affects you and affects your decision making, social media is not going to help you to sort of train yourself to be, firm-minded, I suppose. I think that we as human beings can be very malleable at times, and we don't always notice when we're being influenced. We talk so much about becoming influencers and having influence, but social media will make you feel some type of way sometimes, and you won't even know that it's happening. So as an artist, you need to keep your eye on that as well. Take your social media breaks. Step away from the technology every now and again. Schedule it if you have to, and use it as a tool. It's something that will help you get things done, but don't rely on it for your self-worth. For those Instagram numbers are not going to tell you what's in your bank account. They're just numbers.
I think we put such emphasis on social media these days because we feel like it's the way that we can get around and get noticed. But at the same time, it's stealing your precious time to actually hone your craft, So to a certain extent, it's necessary to understand it, but it's not the core of what you do. And I think people need to get back to that. Marcia, what do you have to say about social media? Would it make things easier or more difficult for artists?
My answer is going to be yes and no. I think in this generation, as we find ourselves in, everything is online. You have the world basically in the palm of your hand, and you can reach billions of people within hours. Something can go viral, but it could be good or bad. So what I think people need to remember is that it is a tool, but it can be a weapon as well. So, the minute somebody gets a little bit of attention, there's somebody that's going to go hunt back years and see what you've done on social media. Did you make a sensitive statement? Was there hate speech? So people need to realize that whatever you put on social media is there forever. So you need to post with integrity all of the time. I mean, I think it's a good exercise to go back to your high school years and look at what you posted on Facebook or commented on a picture, or so my answer is yes and no, because from a legal point of view, I think yes, it's great. Your reach is amazing. You can reach the whole world within 24 hours, even less. But also, my no is that it can be detrimental to your career and to the kind of reach that you want. So I think people need to realize that social media is there to help, but it can be dangerous as well. And there are consequences for negative or illegal behavior online.
It's interesting you say that, because nowadays there are functions where you can delete content and go back and delete, but there's always that ethical hacker or unethical hacker. I think it's white hackers or black hackers, whichever one. I think they're both capable of doing the same thing, basically. But getting that information, I think we can understand this from, a political point of view, where you're dealing with presidential information, especially. So, yeah, I guess it's yes and no is definitely a good answer. I am dying to ask this question, and I think Shiba and I spoke about this. And have you ever experienced an artist management moment where you made the move and you made it and it was risky? Or you made the move was risky and the risk was successful?
I was thinking about this, and it's bringing me back to the moment from that Norway trip. I just started working with Platoon at the beginning of last year, and they had implemented a bunch of label services, including sort of campaigning. And so I was managing campaigns for a few artists for the first quarter. And so during this Norway trip, I thought, there's this young man called King Nintendo, and he's just got this amazing style, very original vendor rapper. And you don't get a lot of vendor rappers, actually. And so we were looking for some acts to bring over to Norway, and I'd never met him. I don't know if I would repeat this, but my instincts were telling me there's something special about this young man. I've listened to his music and I've read some of his stuff. We've had a couple of conversations, and he'd been recommended to me by some fellow writers. I think it was a year or so before. And I thought, let's bring him, let's book him, let's see if he can perform. I've never been to one of his shows, nothing. So there was a huge gamble. I didn't know what I was in for. But I spoke to the guys at Platoon and I said, this is one of your guys, what do you think? And they were like, okay, we trust you. Let's see what happens. And so we went on this trip. I arrived a couple of days early because we were working on production and sort of setting the scene and everything. And he arrived, we were supposed to be on the same flight, but he arrived a day later. And this was the first time that I'd met him. I didn't know what he was going to be like. So sometimes you want to get a feel for someone and figure out what their temperament is, what their habits are. And my instincts were pretty spot on. He was staying at the same hotel as the rest of us, and we would all go downstairs for breakfast. And he's obsessed with drinking tea. So he was always carrying some tea around with him, doesn't drink alcohol, very even-tempered, philosophical guy, ready to perform every time, very hands-on. He was just such a dream to work with, and the music was just so good. And I think he managed to get a lot done in that week, where he made a lot of friends very quickly. He made great impressions so fast that we could take him on a media run around Norway to some radio stations. He knew what to say at just the right time. I didn't have to train him, which is something that I've had to do before. Some artists don't have media training, and so they don't know how to, you shove a mic in their face and they just sort of freeze. And like Marcia was saying, on social media, you say the wrong thing, it's over, it's there forever. But none of that was a concern. So that was a gamble, but we got the content, we had our performances, we made a lot of great connections, and we left Norway with some great footage and a nice bump in his streams, and I was very happy. And to this day, I would do it again, definitely.
That's so great. And you obviously still managing this artist right now, right?
I probably should have mentioned this earlier when you asked what kind of artists I work with. And it's usually, how do I say this? They're sort of on the cusp of becoming something that that sort of sells itself. The analogy where you have your cash cow and your dog and your rising star. He's graduated away from me. I like to work with artists who need just that push to be able to get things really going. Once you're in a direction where you have a good team and you can carry that, and it's just a matter of spinning off of the things that have been happening, I don't think those artists really need me anymore. But when someone has a great talent and they've got everything in place except for that one missing thing, maybe it's a brand shift or some introductions to some powerful people who can do something with them, those are the artists that I like. And King Batendo is one of those. And I think that he, he's found what he wants to do, and he no longer really needs me to sort of guide him anymore. And I think that trip was a big part of that realization. So, yeah, success.